Well, good evening, you beautiful New Zealanders. We're still in this series on David Seymour's Treaty Principles Bill. So what's in the box today? In this video, I'm going to commentating on TVNZ's Q&A with Jack Tame and David Seymour, which was aired on the 23rd of November. I'm specifically in this video, I'm talking about Jack Tame and what he said about Ngāi Tahu having sovereignty over 90% of the South Island. Remember that? That was a bit of a shock. And it just sort of came out in the interview. Number 3, now this is really interesting. It highlights the danger of having history-ignorant MPs in power. We should talk a little bit more about that. And it also highlights the danger of this guy called Jack Tame. My questions are these. Is Tame deliberately deceiving Kiwis about the treaty? Or is he just history ignorant? Or both? Well, you decide. Is he deliberately leading people astray? Or just does he not know any better? So I'm going to be exploring a bit of that in this video, so let's watch it together.
So Section 6 of the Ngāi Tahu Claims Settlement Act says this, quote, "In fulfilment of its treaty obligations, the Crown recognises Ngāi Tahu as the tangata whenua of and as holding rangatiratanga within the takiwā, so the catchment, of Ngāi Tahu whānui." So under your principles, do you accept that Ngāi Tahu has full sovereignty over 90% of the South Island?
Well, we've said that we're going to accept, or we're not going to mess with treaty settlements. So you're required to follow those. And of course, I'm not going to be the one that tells everyone exactly what it means. Funnily enough, I think that's why we have courts. However, that would be a plain reading of what it says.
Right. So Ngāi Tahu, tino rangatiratanga over 90% of the South Island, according to your principles.
Well, again, that's what a previous government signed up to in a treaty.
It's a pretty significant. I mean, to accept that via your interpretation of the principles, that's a pretty significant finding.
Well, it is, because unfortunately that's the settlement that's in place. Do I agree with it? I'm not sure I would have put it that way. However, Parliament signed off, and we've been very clear in this legislation that we're not going to interrupt or in any way mess with treaty settlements. So that's where you land.
What are the implications of that?
Okay, I want you to notice something here. Tame said, in fulfilment of its treaty obligations, the Crown recognises Ngāi Tahu as the tangata whenua and is holding tino rangatiratanga within the taikawa, or the catchment, of Ngāi Tahu whānui. Not very good on Maori, but you get the idea. So he says, so do you accept that under your principle that Ngāi Tahu has sovereignty over 90% of the South Island? That's what he actually said. Well, wait a minute, Jack. Not so fast. You have just told your audience that tino rangatiratanga means sovereignty. This is quite wrong. No, it doesn't, Jack. It does not mean that. Now, what's interesting for me is that of all the comments on my previous video about 90% of the South Island falling under the sovereignty of Ngāi Tahu, I don't think I got one comment. I don't think there was one comment about Jack Tame's wrong understanding of this word tino rangatiratanga. So let me explain. Okay, put your seatbelt on, because I'm just going to take you through a little bit of history. We need to know this so that we can fully understand what was going on with Bulger, Jack Tame, and David Seymour. The treaty in MAORI was constructed from a final English draft on the 4th of February 1840. This final English draft of the treaty, also known as the Littlewood Draft, and the treaty in MAORI are, we could say, a perfect match. That is to say, if you want to know what the treaty in MAORI says, just read the final English draft. So there's the final English draft, here's the treaty in MAORI. The two are virtually identical. Now, the Littlewood final English draft is crucially important in the whole treaty debate, because it tells us what the British intended the treaty to mean and what it actually did mean. Now, we never hear the British perspective in New Zealand at the moment. We always hear what the Maoris say it says, what the activists say it says, but when do you ever hear the British perspective? Weren't they the other ones in this agreement? Weren't they the ones on the other side of the table? How come we don't hear from them? Well, I'm giving it to you tonight. If we truly understand the Littlewood final English draft and we hang on to it, it stops us being hoodwinked by Maori activists. You know what? I can't emphasize this point enough. The activists use what's known as the rogue James Freeman version of the treaty as the treaty in English. The rogue James Freeman version is very different from the treaty in Maori. Activists use this version because it allows them to make the treaty say what they want it to say and what it does not say. So here's the rogue James Freeman version, and this is the treaty in MAORI. Now, that rogue James Freeman version of the treaty is in Schedule 1 of the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975, and they wanted that in there so they could start manipulating the treaty, you see. So these two are very different. Well, why did they want that one so badly for the Treaty of Waitangi Act? Well, this opened the door for activists to tell us that Henry Williams, in 1840, there he is, he was the guy who translated the final English draft into Maori on the 4th of February at 4 p.m. 1840, they say, oh, he did a very bad job on the translation. This then leads them on to telling us that we need them to do a back translation for us. This leads them to being able to make the treaty say what they want it to say. See how it goes? See the little train of thought there? Well, it's been a cunning plan that they've been running for nearly 50 years. Cunning as a fox, in fact. They are so cunning, the way they've set this up. So here again is Article 2 of the Treaty, Sentence 1. It says this: the Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and the tribes and to all the people of New Zealand the possession of their lands, dwellings, and all their property. Now that word possession is in Maori was translated tino rangatiratanga. What this is saying is that the British guaranteed Maori the possession or the ownership of their land, dwellings, and property. That is all. We could swap out the word possession for ownership. When we do this, what the British intention was becomes even more clear. See that? So just hang on to the fact that that word possession translates into Maori as tino rangatiratanga. Now here is a crucial consideration. If the British were going to protect the Maori ownership or possession of Maori land, they, the British, needed to define the boundaries of that land which each chief owned. That just makes total sense. The British could not protect what was undefined. So, top of mind for the British was surveying the land that each chief claimed they owned. The best way to explain this is like this. Imagine a map of New Zealand. In the middle of the North Island, draw a red square, say 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre. Let's say this square represents the land owned by a particular chief as at the 6th of February 1840. The British considered that everything on that piece of land, including the land itself, dwellings, chattels, rivers, mountains, forests, everything, was literally owned by that tribe. The British promised to protect that chief's ownership of everything inside that 1 centimetre square. That is all that Article 2, Sentence 1 promised. Today we just call it house and chattels. You know, really nothing's changed between 1840 and today for all New Zealanders. Let me explain what I mean. You've got your house, your land, and your chattels. Here's a picture of a New Zealand house with the house and the land and the chattels there. There's a caravan and there's a few bits and pieces hanging around the place. Well, on the right is a picture of a Kiwi home for sale. Notice the land. Notice the chattels. If this was the house of a Maori chief in 1840, all the British were saying was, we guarantee you your ownership of your house, your land, and your chattels. No other tribe will be able to come and steal these from you. We guarantee to protect them. If you sell them, this protection extends to the new owner. It was as simple as that. So Maori activists have made it hugely complicated that they're talking about the whole of New Zealand being given back to them and they're in control of the whole country and all the resources and on it goes. It's nonsense. All the British were saying is that you can still be chiefs over the land you own at the point of signing the treaty. That's all they were saying. That was all. So we got our 1 centimetre squares. Well, roughly 540 chiefs signed that treaty. So in effect, we could say there were 540 1 centimetre squares all over New Zealand, each square representing the land owned by each chief. So don't get me wrong though, it was not just chiefs who owned land. There was also iwi and hapu or families, and British set about surveying their land as well. Now here is the crucial point I want us to grasp. In the decades following 1840, records show that Maori went on to sell 92% of their land. That is absolutely a fact. For example, in my previous video, I showed how 90% of the South Island was sold by Maori before 1864. Remember that? And if you haven't seen that video, go back and have a look at that. The North Island is exactly the same. Treaty researcher and treaty commentator Mike Butler has done excellent work on this, putting together all the facts about how much land Maori actually sold. So I'll put his findings in the description of this video. So just hold on to that fact. 92% of New Zealand was actually sold by Maori post 1840. You know what, the truth of the matter is that 33% of New Zealand was sold by Maori to settlers before the treaty was even signed. Did you know that? So from 1800 onwards, settlers were arriving here in ships. They'd come ashore and they'd just buy some land off a Maori chief. And before the treaty was even signed, 33% of this country had been sold by Maori chiefs to settlers and to entrepreneurs. So much for the narrative that we hear today that all the land was stolen. That's just absolutely rubbish. These sales are recorded in what's known as the H.H. TURTON records. There's H.H. TURTON on the right hand side there. Handsome looking dude. So I'll put these records in the description of this video as well so that you can go through them yourself and just see them for yourself. So here are the actual H.H. TURTON documents, and if you get into this document, it says there's the title pre-treaty and preemptive land buys of New Zealand. And if we scroll down, it was actually put together by Jean Jackson. She collated everything, and all credit to her. So if you keep scrolling down, keep going down, you'll find that the sales start here, and it says the list of buyers and deeds in H.H. Turton's Old Land Claims Part 2, where much land and investment were lost, favouring the chiefs who sold and occasionally the crown. So what happened was, when Hobson got here, he said, we are going to investigate all the sales that have occurred before 1840, before I got here. That's basically what Hobson said. And they appointed somebody called William Spain, as in the country, S-P-A-I-N, to investigate all the pre-1840 land sales. So there's William Spain. He's the Land Commissioner, 1840. His job was to investigate all the pre-1840 land sales on behalf of the British government. If all the paperwork was not in order, the sale would be disqualified. For example, boundaries not clearly marked out on paper, or the longitude and latitude not specified, or the sale price not clearly specified, or the signatures of all the parties were not there, or if the Maori selling did not have the right to sell, and that was often the case, and so on. Then if any of those boxes ticked, then William Spain would just disqualify the sale. And what would happen is that this poor settlers who'd come in and paid in good faith money for land, and they would have marked it out, they lost all their money. Maori had spent all the money, and so the British were very, very generous with Maori, and this Land Sales Commission favoured Maori enormously. So sometimes Maori would be able to sell one piece of land 1, 2, 3, 4, even sometimes up to 8 times. So the narrative we have today that Maori were ripped off with their land sales is absolutely bollocks. It's complete nonsense. It's a great big load of BS. So let's just have a look at some of these sales. I'm going to try and use my pen here to draw something for us. Let's take this guy here, this one right here, say Mr. Atherton with Kelly Whitaker. That's sale number 585, and there's some sort of internal categorizing going on there in 254. But here's the crucial thing. The date is the 1st of April 1839. That's clearly marked. And here are the chiefs who actually sold this land, and so they're all noted. Hokianga, Patu, well, whatever, Tawa, Kauau, and X-Black or Green, whatever. They sold 3,000 acres, and the amount of money they paid was £133, 8 shillings and tuppence, plus 3 goods. Now, because the goods weren't specified, that would probably disqualify the sale. Do you see how it works? So if you scroll through all these sales and see how much land, and some of them are like 1 million acres. You got to remember that New Zealand at this time was, and has always been, 66 million acres in total. So just keep that in mind. And go scroll through and have a look at all these sales, because these are facts. These are not just made up. This is actual facts of Maori selling land prior to 1840. And then going on legally and legitimately to sell 92% of their land after 1840. So there you go. It's all out there. Okay, what I'm about to say is crucially important for us to grasp. It's about land sales and the concept of sovereignty. When land is sold, sovereignty is transferred from one owner to the next. Is that not true? For example, when person A sells his house to person B and person B moves into the house, person B becomes the sovereign over that house and the land on which that house sits. Is that not true? To use Maori concepts, person A used to be the chief of that house and that land, but when the house and the land was sold to person B becomes the new chief. So how could Bolger give sovereignty to Ngāi Tahu when they had sold their land? Come on. Maori used to own all the land of New Zealand. They went on to sell 92% of it in the decades following 1840. Did you know that? Therefore, they lost their sovereignty over that 92%. The truth is, they ceded sovereignty twice. First, through the sale of their land, because when you sell land, you lose your sovereignty over it. And secondly, by signing the treaty, Article 1. So their claim for self-determination, sovereignty, control over New Zealand's resources today, 2024, etc., are completely without foundation. You know what? The idea is a scam. It's just a parallel universe stuff. So when Tame made Tino Rangatiratanga out to mean sovereignty and not simple possession, was he being deceitful or was he just ignorant? Or was he speaking as a Maori activist would speak, for this is how they speak? Activists think that Tino Rangatiratanga means sovereignty, just like Jack. Well, you decide whether Jack was being deceitful or whether he's just ignorant. Why did not David Seymour pick up Tame on this, that Tino Rangatiratanga does not mean sovereignty? Why didn't Seymour pick him up and say, hey, wait a minute, Jack, Tino Rangatiratanga does not mean sovereignty, it means possession? Well, David, unfortunately, is history ignorant too. He said, leave it to the courts to decide what the treaty means. Well, I'm surprised that he said this, because the courts are now stacked with activists. And David Seymour knows that. The danger of history ignorance amongst MPs. David is extremely weak on the treaty, as are all MPs. Bolger had no authority, no mandate to cede 90% of the South Island to Ngāi Tahu in 1998. Bolger, in doing this, showed he was history ignorant. He had no knowledge of the history of the sale of land in the South Island. And Jack Tame is the same. If Tame was not history ignorant, he would never have put the questions to Seymour like, quote, what do you think of the Crown acknowledging that Ngāi Tahu have sovereignty over 90% of the South Island? Jack wouldn't have asked that question. So Jack Tame is an activist. Everything he says must be fact-checked. He is holding and promoting activist understandings of the treaty on TV. As such, he is misleading Kiwis. It seems to me that most Kiwis have been under the spell of activist understandings of the treaty for the last 50 years. And you know what? Most have succumbed. We need to be deprogrammed. I know this because the last video I made received over 400 comments. No one mentioned how Jack Tame, by sleight of hand, had replaced the word possession with the word sovereignty, which is pretty telling. So you guys out there, my friends, we need to be deprogrammed, because we're all carrying activist understandings of the treaty. See, we don't know the difference. This is why we've got to know the treaty. So let's conclude this now. Bolger did in fact give away 90% of the sovereignty of the South Island to Ngāi Tahu in 1998. This was because he was terribly history ignorant. Seymour has the same weakness. He is not alone. Most MPs are the same. There is a truthful, factual understanding of the treaty, and then there is an activist understanding of the treaty, which is a pack of lies. If you want the truth and the facts about the treaty, glue yourself to the Littlewood Final English Draft. When it comes to the treaty, if you want misinformation and BS, listen to Jack. Number 7, Tino Rangatiratanga means possession, not sovereignty. Number 8, it appears that the government has adopted the activist understanding of the treaty, which is a tragic mistake. Number 9, by this I mean they think Tino Rangatiratanga means sovereignty or self-determination, not possession. Number 10, Maori in New Zealand ceded sovereignty twice, once through the sale of their land and secondly through ceding it again in the treaty. Number 11, this interview between Tame and Seymour highlights the danger and the folly of using Maori words inside legal documents. It should never be allowed. Why? Because it makes the document unclear, open to interpretation. And legal documents which are unclear are a nonsense. They should never be allowed to be. The government should pass a law that no statutes or laws or settlements are to contain any language other than English. All MPs must be put through a compulsory course on the treaty. Let the British come here and give us their perspective. Don't let activists anywhere near MPs. Number 19, all historic settlements to all Maori tribes must be urgently reviewed. We need to get behind David Seymour's original Treaty Principles Bill. Not the 3 principles that were screwed over by the government, but the original 3, because those original 3 faithfully reflect the true intent and meaning of the treaty. If you have not made a submission to this bill, please do so. I have made a video on how to do this, which I have put in the description of this video. Okay guys, that's enough for today's video. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing these videos, for getting them out to your mates and your friends and them doing the same. It's just so incredible. We're having tremendous success at the moment. We've had 1,400 people join our channel in the last 28 days, so that's phenomenal. Don't forget to keep getting our business cards out. They're really working. There they are there. Now, to get cards, just email stopcogovernance and .kiwi. They're only 3 cents each plus courier. If you can just do a couple of streets around your place, that would be absolutely phenomenal. Don't also forget to get our new book called The Psychology of Takeover. Please get some of these booklets. They're going to be 80 pages long. They'll be $3, not $2. The cost of printing has gone up. So if you'd like to truly understand what the heck is going on in New Zealand, all the stuff that's under the surface that you're scratching your head about, this booklet is the key, which will truly help you to get it, if you know what I mean. You can order this book by emailing the same email address, cards@stopcogovernance.kiwi. As usual, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. You know what? When you like and when you comment and when you subscribe, man, it really helps the cause. So please get people to do that. Thank you so much for those chipping in financially. You're helping us stay afloat. That's so important if you want to keep us going. So see you next time. You guys are awesome.